sometimes think of the heart as a lamp. The old-fashioned kind that uses oil and a wick that you dial up or down to adjust the flame. Not that we're always in control of the dial, just that the warmth and light of the heart can be adjusted through attention, care, and practice. Like Suzanne, I too am entering a period of anticipatory grief with 2 loved ones in my life. And what I'm aware of right now is how stuck I am in my head, focusing on all the things that need to be done, the appointments, worrying about who's going to do what. And when I check in with my heart, it's pretty numb. And so I'm starting to realize that I need my hand on that little dial of the lamp in my heart. The lyrics to the hymn we just sang, which come from a passage in a well-known Buddhist scripture called the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, might be interpreted as referring to the mind. Be ye lamps unto yourselves. Be your own confidence. Hold to the truth within yourselves as to the only lamp. Taken out of context, as it is in our Unitarian Universalist hymnal, this passage can easily be misunderstood. In Buddhism, the mind doesn't just mean the head, the thought center. It also means the heart, the locus of compassion. And in Buddhism, the idea of a fixed and separate self is actually an illusion. So be ye lamps unto yourselves does not mean trust only the light bulb in your head, nor does it mean we should rely only on our own individual selves. Quite the contrary. At the very least, it means trust the lamp of your awakened being, your wholeheartedness, which is in reality the interpenetration of all things. As I travel deeper into loss, I want my heart, the lamp of my heart, my full awakened being to guide my way, to be present with both grief and delight. There is another well-known passage in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta. The very last words the Buddha purportedly says to his disciples before he dies. Of the various translations, here's the one I like best. Behold, O monks, this is my last advice to you. All component things in the world are changeable. They are not lasting. Work hard to gain your own enlightenment. Now, what if that passage was included in our hymnal? Behold, everything in the world is changeable. Nothing is lasting or fixed. Work hard to understand this so you can be free. As a Unitarian Universalist shaped by Buddhist teaching and practice, I would love to see that passage in our hymnal. This basic Buddhist teaching about impermanence is key to my own understanding of grief and delight, especially what binds them together so counterintuitively as kin. Impermanence, change, isn't that the root cause of grief, of loss? And what about delight? That's not so obvious maybe, but I think delight also arises from impermanence and change. There is often an element of surprise in the experience of delight, a recognition of transience. A rainbow, for example, evokes delight because it's so short-lived, so transitory. We catch our breath, or at least I do, with delight when we notice one, and we might cry out, "Rainbow! Rainbow!" I do, every time. We feel lucky to have seen it because we know it will soon disappear. Many of us delight in babies and children because they too are soon gone. And because it's Father's Day, let's just pause a minute here. How many times do we tell exhausted, strung out new parents who are wondering how they are ever going to survive this thing called parenthood. How often do we tell them when they say how hard things are, oh, but they grow up so fast. Enjoy them while you can. I know from experience it doesn't help the exhausted and strung out parents to hear that. But we're trying to name a truth that is so clear to the rest of us. They do grow up so fast. And in this sense, the loss in child rearing is nearly constant, which is also part of the delight. Do you think we'd find babies delightful if they never grew up? Not so sure. What about sensory delights? Sensory delights, too, are delightful because they don't last. The exquisite pleasure of chocolate melting on the tongue, or warm water enveloping your skin as you lower yourself into a steaming bath, blossoming fruit trees in spring. I heard someone say sex, I think, or it was. And we all find delight in, different things. So substitute whatever is your sensory pleasure and just think, is it true that the delight in part comes from the impermanence of the experience, from the change, the contrast with what's before or after, the knowledge that the sensation and the experience and the delightful thing itself will not last. The delight comes in part because of the impending loss. In the reading I did earlier, Lebanese-American writer Khalil Gibran says that when we grieve, we weep for what has been our delight, and that which gives us sorrow also gives us joy. And the poem that Jack read by the English Romantic poet William Blake, under every grief and pine runs a joy with silken twine. So many poets and spiritual teachers tell us that grief and delight are inseparable. And if we turn to our own experience and reflect deeply on it like Suzanne did, I think we will find truth here. It won't be the same for each one of us, the way grief and delight intertwine, but I do believe it's something we all share. It's simply part of life in a constantly changing, interdependent universe. Grief itself is constantly changing. Grief is not orderly or predictable. It does not advance in neat stages, delivering you to the end as some former griefless state. Nor is grief only and always just sorrow. Sometimes in the midst of tears, laughter comes, as the poet Mary Oliver writes of her own dense grief. Laughter comes now again out of my own startled mouth. And this poem by Jan Richardson, from the exquisite collection of blessings for times of grief that she wrote while mourning the death of her spouse. It is hard being wedded to the dead, Richardson writes. It is hard being wedded to the dead. They make different claims, offer comforts that do not feel comfortable at the first. They do not let you remain numb. Neither do they allow you to languish forever in your grief. They will safeguard your sorrow, but will not permit that it should become your new country, your home. They knew you first in joy, in delight, and though they will be patient when you travel other roads, it is here they will wait for you. Here they can best be found, where the river runs deep with gladness, the water over each stone singing your unforgotten name. Eventually, Richardson suggests in this poem, the very ones for whom we grieve will lure us back to joy. As we wander through the dense landscape of grief, our beloved dead wait for us patiently in our joy, in our delight. Together they come, says Khalil Gibran, of grief and delight. And when one sits alone at your board, remember that the other is asleep upon your bed. Together they come. The challenge for us all, I believe, and the path toward wholeness and liberation is to welcome them both. Joy and sorrow, grief and delight. Most of us spend a good deal of energy trying to avoid sorrow and loss, trying to push away the truth of impermanence or at least distract ourselves from it. And this is an understandable desire, but it doesn't stop the losses. Our consumer culture promises fixes for everything imaginable, but impermanence can't be fixed. Our death-denying culture can't stop death. It can just make us less prepared for it. It can, and it does, rob us of our much-needed resilience. It can even rob us of our delight. The deeper that sorrow carves into your being, says Khalil Gibran, the more joy you can contain. That doesn't mean we need to seek out sorrow in order to increase joy. Lord knows there's more than enough sorrow to go around in this world. But what it does mean is that the more we allow ourselves to feel sorrow, to experience grief, the more able we might be to feel joy, to experience delight as well. And that's what I'm working on personally and where I am with anticipatory grief. The more we practice accepting the truth of impermanence, the more we open ourselves to joy and delight. I had a Buddhist teacher once who liked to tell this one parable, which kind of bothered me. Maybe you've heard it before. One day, while walking through the wilderness, a man stumbled upon a ferocious tiger. He turned and ran with the tiger in hot pursuit, through trees, around rocks, and over thorn bushes. And just as the man felt the tiger closing in upon him, he came to the edge of a high cliff. Desperate to save himself, the man grabbed a nearby vine and threw himself over the cliff. The vine was just long enough for the man, grasping onto the end, to escape the tiger's reach from above. And as he hung there, dangling over the fatal precipice, 2 mice appeared from a hole in the cliff and began gnawing on the vine. Assessing his truly desperate situation, the man noticed something else from the corner of his eye, something red. When he looked closely, he discovered a luscious, plump strawberry growing right out of a crack in the cliff. With one arm clutching the vine, the man reached over with the other arm, plucked the strawberry, and popped it in his mouth. It was the most delicious morsel he'd ever tasted. The end. That story and the delight it clearly gave my teacher to tell it used to confound me. Who would ever eat a strawberry under those circumstances? Why bother? And why bother telling such a story, especially more than once? What's the point, I used to think. You can see I'm literal. I'm not exactly sure what changed for me. Time, I guess, and more of life. But now I love this story. I still don't think I'm as spiritually enlightened as that man who ate the strawberry, but I get it now. There's no escaping death, so we might as well enjoy the strawberry while we can. And boy, does it taste better and sweeter and juicier when we know it could be our last. Being aware of impermanence heightens the experience of delight. The writer Ross Gay writes, I dreamed a few years back that I was in a supermarket checking out when I had a stark and luminous and devastating realization, in a clear way, not that oh yeah way, that my life would end. I wept in line watching people go by with their carts, watching the cashier move items over the scanner, feeling such an absolute love for this life. And the mundane fact of buying groceries with other people whom I do not know, like all the banalities, would soon be no more. That was Ross Gay. When we are aware of what we will one day lose, which is everything, even the most mundane things can bring us intense delight. So is the path of delight also the path of grief? It might be sometimes, for some of us, the very same path. I'm reluctant to generalize about grief because each loss is so particular and how we respond to each one so unique. But what I believe to be true for all of us is this. The path to spiritual wholeness entails being intimate with both grief and delight. And the path to beloved community entails being intimate together with our griefs and our delights, learning together to embrace both beauty and brokenness, both joy and loss, for the benefit of all. I believe this is what we are practicing in this community. Learning to accept change, to relish delight, to stay present in the face of loss and uncertainty, to welcome in the new and unexpected, to trust that alongside sorrow, joy returns and delight if we keep our hearts open, if we make lamps of ourselves. We just bid farewell to our music director, Joel Chapman, last week, and my contract ends on July 2nd. Amidst the goodbyes, the search committees are hard at work to bring you good news, new delights. You just voted to adopt the 8th principle. Now, together, you get to live into that commitment to dismantle racism and other oppressions in yourselves and in this congregation. Together, you are ready to face the grief and experience the delight that is part of the journey towards spiritual wholeness and liberation for all. So, my friends, behold, everything in the world is changeable. Nothing is lasting or fixed. The self-same well from which your laughter arises is oftentimes filled with your tears. Work hard to understand this so you can be free. Opening to both grief and delight, make a lamp of your heart. Do this together, and love illuminates the world. May it be so, and amen.